He stood over her lifeless body, blood soaking through her nightgown, the same woman he once promised to love and protect. 13 years of marriage ended in a single cold-blooded moment. No kids, no witnesses, just silence and a single call to 911. I think I killed my wife. What could push a man to murder the woman he shared his life with for over a decade? Was it rage? Was it betrayal? Or was it something much darker, buried deep beneath 13 quiet years of marriage? This story is not just about a murder. It's about the secrets we keep, the smiles we fake, the families we build and then destroy. And when the truth finally came out, no one, not even the police, were prepared for the twist. Like, comment, and subscribe if you think you've seen every kind of love story gone wrong. Trust us, you haven't heard this one. Let's go back to where it all began, before the blood, before the sirens, before the headlines. Jerome and LaToya Bryant were the picture of a solid couple. High school sweethearts from Charlotte, North Carolina, who stuck together through college, through job losses, through family drama, and even through infertility. They had a love story people envied. Church folk called them blessed. Neighbors said they were quiet but sweet. But behind those brick walls was tension, a lot of it. They had been married for 13 years. 13. That's longer than some kids get to spend with both their parents. And in all that time, no children. It wasn't for lack of trying. LaToya had 2 miscarriages by the time she turned 33. Jerome had gone through 3 rounds of IVF with her, even sold his Mustang to help pay for one of them. They both wanted to be parents more than anything. But it never happened. And over time, that pain turned into blame. LaToya started pulling away. Jerome started staying out late. They stopped praying together, stopped touching each other. And slowly, their home turned cold. But they stayed married. Maybe because of love. Maybe because of fear. Or maybe because starting over at that age just felt harder than staying stuck. What most people didn't know was that Jerome was struggling, mentally and emotionally. He worked as an HVAC technician and had just been laid off. He didn't tell LaToya right away. For weeks, he'd pretend to go to work, drive around aimlessly, sit in parking lots until it was time to come home. LaToya, on the other hand, had just gotten promoted. She was now a lead billing coordinator at a medical clinic. More money, more hours, and a lot more attention from coworkers, from old Facebook friends, and even from one particular guy who sent her heart emojis under her posts. Jerome saw the comment. He read all the replies. And that night, he didn't eat dinner. He barely looked at her. Just stared at the TV while she hummed through the dishes. But the truth is, that heart emoji wasn't the beginning of the end. It was just a crack in the wall that had already been crumbling. 3 months before the murder, LaToya's younger sister, Kendra, came to stay with them. Her apartment had flooded, and Jerome, trying to be supportive, said she could crash in the guest room for a few weeks. A few weeks turned into 2 months. Kendra was loud, fun, messy, and observant. She started noticing how little they spoke to each other. How LaToya would sleep with her back to him. How Jerome would step outside to take calls and come back smelling like cologne. One night, Kendra heard something. Whispering. Crying. A soft thud. She walked past their door and heard Jerome saying, "You don't respect me. You treat me like I'm nothing." LaToya answered, "Because you stopped trying. You gave up on us." Then, silence. The next morning, LaToya had a bruise under her eye. She said she bumped into the cabinet. That was the first time Kendra started thinking something was really wrong. And she wasn't wrong. Midway through June, Kendra secretly recorded a conversation between them. LaToya was begging him to go to counseling. Jerome told her he didn't need some stranger in a suit to fix his marriage. He needed a wife who believed in him. But what she said next broke him. "I can't carry this marriage and your insecurities. I want a divorce." That was the first time she'd said the D word out loud. That night, Jerome didn't sleep. He sat on the porch smoking a black and mild, staring at the sky. The next morning, he went to his old job site and begged for part-time work. They turned him away. Later that afternoon, he stopped at a pawn shop and bought a used .38 revolver. He didn't register it, didn't tell anyone, just brought it home and kept it in the nightstand. This wasn't about protection. This was about control. And no one, not LaToya, not Kendra, not his family, knew he was spiraling. By July, things had hit a boiling point. LaToya had filed the first round of divorce papers. Jerome never signed them. He told her, "If I can't have this marriage, no one will." But still, they lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, pretended, for the world, that things were fine. Until the night of July 2nd. It was 11:48 p.m. Kendra was away visiting a friend. LaToya was getting ready for bed. She had just brushed her teeth, tied her scarf, and walked into the bedroom wearing her favorite lavender nightgown. Jerome was already sitting on the bed, silent, staring at her. She said something casual, like, "Turn off the lamp." And that's when he snapped. He stood up, walked to the nightstand, opened the drawer, pulled out the revolver, and shot her. Once in the chest, twice in the stomach, one final shot, to the head. Neighbors said they heard what sounded like fireworks. But this was July in North Carolina. No one thought anything of it, except Jerome. He stood there, staring at what he'd done, breathing heavy, eyes wide. Then, calmly, he picked up the phone and dialed 911. The operator answered, "911, what's your emergency?" And all he said was, "I think I killed my wife." He said it again. I killed my wife." When police arrived, they found Jerome on the porch, barefoot, hands shaking. Inside, LaToya's body was still warm. Blood pooled under her like spilled paint. The room smelled like gunpowder and lavender. Jerome didn't run. He didn't hide. He just stared at the floor and whispered, "She was leaving me. I couldn't let her go." And just when they thought they'd heard it all, a new voice entered the story, a voicemail on LaToya's phone. It was from the man who had been sending her heart emojis. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I booked the hotel suite like we said. No more hiding." No one, not even LaToya's own sister, knew she was planning to leave town with another man. And the real twist? The man's identity would shake her entire family to the core. Drop a comment below if you think you already know who he was. Hit that like button if you're still with us, and get ready. He was more than just a flirt in her comments. More than just a random admirer sliding into DMs. He was blood. Family. Someone Jerome had trusted with his life since childhood. The voice on the voicemail? It belonged to Brandon Bryant, Jerome's younger cousin. Same last name. Same family cookouts. Same childhood bedrooms when their parents couldn't afford separate rooms on vacation. And now, Brandon was the man LaToya was secretly seeing. The man she planned to run away with. The man who had been whispering sweet nothings into her phone while Jerome was falling apart just 2 rooms away. When detectives played that voicemail for Jerome in the interrogation room, his face didn't change. No tears. No screams. Just a slow blink and one chilling sentence. "I knew it. I just didn't want to believe it." But let's rewind. How did Brandon, Jerome's own flesh and blood, end up in the middle of this tragedy? It started small. Family game nights. Random text check-ins. Brandon would swing by the house after work, usually when Jerome was out. He worked at a nearby car dealership and would often say, "I was just in the neighborhood." LaToya thought it was innocent at first. She and Brandon had always gotten along. He was younger, charming, the kind of guy who noticed small things like new hairstyles or how good she looked in blue. Jerome didn't notice anymore. He was tired, depressed, angry, and deep down, maybe she felt like she deserved to be seen, to feel wanted. So she let it happen. The texts, the laughs, the wine shared on the couch when Jerome was out on one of his walks. One night, when a storm knocked out the power, Brandon stayed a little longer than usual. Jerome was gone. Kendra was asleep upstairs. LaToya lit candles in the kitchen, and Brandon sat across from her. They talked about dreams, regrets, and the things they both wished were different. And then, he kissed her. She didn't stop him. In fact, that was the moment everything changed. From that night on, they were in an emotional affair, one that quickly turned physical. LaToya was careful, erasing texts, hiding call logs, keeping things quiet. But Jerome wasn't stupid. He noticed her new energy. The sudden smiles. The longer showers. The way her phone never left her side. He never confronted her, not directly. But the silence between them started to thicken. Every dinner was tense. Every night colder than the last. Still, LaToya kept seeing Brandon. She told herself she wasn't cheating, she was just finding peace. After 13 years of pain, heartbreak, and disappointment, she felt alive again. But Brandon? He wasn't just some rebound. He had plans. He told her he loved her, that he'd always had feelings for her, that if she left Jerome, they could start fresh, maybe even move to Atlanta, where his job had an opening. She told him she needed time, that she had to be careful, that Jerome was unstable, and she was right. Around that time, Jerome's behavior got worse. He wasn't sleeping. He'd go into rants about how no one respected him, how the world was against him. One day, he smashed a photo frame of their wedding picture during an argument. Kendra tried to talk to LaToya. "Toya, this ain't normal. He's not okay." But LaToya waved her off. "He's just going through it. He'll calm down." She had no idea what Jerome had done that afternoon. He'd followed her after work. Saw her meet Brandon at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Watched them from his car. Saw her lean across the table and touch Brandon's hand. And right then, something inside him broke. He drove home in silence. The next morning, LaToya found her wedding dress on the front porch, soaked in motor oil. She didn't say a word. She just stepped over it and went inside. Later that day, she told Brandon she was ready. Ready to leave. Ready to disappear. She booked a hotel for July 3rd. Told Brandon to meet her there. Told him to wait for her, because she had one last thing to say to Jerome. She never made it to that hotel. Instead, she ended up on the bedroom floor, a trail of blood behind her, the .38 still warm on the nightstand. When police called Brandon the next morning, he was already texting her, "Let me know when you leave. I'll be there." But she didn't reply. And when they told him she was gone, murdered by her husband, he fell silent. Not because of guilt, but because he knew Jerome. He knew what Jerome was capable of when he felt betrayed. And Brandon had betrayed him in the worst way possible. The story made headlines all over North Carolina. Husband murders wife over suspected affair. But the public had no idea just how close that betrayal cut. Family gatherings were canceled. Cousins picked sides. Jerome's parents refused to speak to Brandon. Brandon's own mother called him the reason a good woman is dead. And when Jerome's trial began, the courtroom was a war zone. LaToya's family sat on one side. Jerome's on the other. And Brandon? He sat alone. He was called as a witness. He told the court everything. How the affair began, what LaToya said about Jerome, how they planned to leave together. Jerome didn't look at him once. Not even when Brandon broke down on the stand. "She deserved better," he sobbed. "And I was gonna give it to her." Jerome's lawyer argued mental instability. Claimed he suffered a psychotic break triggered by emotional trauma. But the prosecutor had a different theory. This wasn't a break. This was a plan. Jerome had bought that gun 3 weeks before the murder. Hid it. Waited. And when the right moment came, he used it, not out of fear, but out of fury. And when the verdict came back, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Life in prison. No parole. Jerome didn't flinch. But just when everyone thought the story was over, a letter was discovered in LaToya's nightstand. A handwritten note, dated 3 days before she died. In it, she admitted something no one saw coming. She wasn't pregnant, but she thought she might be. And the baby? Might not have been Jerome's. The letter was short, barely 1 page. Written in LaToya's handwriting, folded neatly in a pale blue envelope with no name on the front. But its contents were explosive. If this test is positive, I'll have to tell him. Not just Jerome, but Brandon too. I can't keep living like this. Someone's going to get hurt. God, Please don't let this tear everything apart." She had tucked it beneath her Bible, almost as if she was praying someone would find it after she was gone. Or maybe, in case she didn't live long enough to deliver the news herself. The letter changed everything. Was this just a desperate woman writing out her thoughts? Or had LaToya known, deep down, that something terrible was coming? The detective who found the letter later admitted he stopped breathing for a second after reading it. The implications were massive. If she had been pregnant, and if the baby wasn't Jerome's, that could have been the real motive behind the murder. Suddenly, the case took a turn. Investigators rushed to recover LaToya's medical records. Blood tests, prescriptions, anything to confirm what she had written. But there was no official confirmation, no doctor's visit, no lab work, no pharmacy pickup. Just the letter, and one unopened pregnancy test found in the master bathroom drawer. Still sealed. Still waiting. Just like LaToya had been. News of the letter spread fast. The media twisted it into headlines like "Love Triangle Ends in Murder," "Was a Baby the Trigger?" and "Pregnancy Twist in Bryant Homicide Stuns North Carolina Community." Inside the courtroom, the letter sparked fury. Brandon, now publicly identified as the other man, was grilled by reporters. "Did you know she was pregnant? Did you pressure her to leave her husband? Was this your child?" Brandon denied knowing anything. "I swear to God, if I had known, I would have protected her. I would have gotten her out of there sooner." But not everyone believed him. LaToya's older brother, Marcus, posted a Facebook status that went viral in the local community. "This ain't love. This was betrayal stacked on top of betrayal. My sister didn't deserve this. And Brandon? You dead to me, bro. You a snake. I don't care what that letter said." Jerome's defense team tried to use the letter as leverage for a reduced sentence. They argued that if LaToya had been carrying another man's child and planning to leave, it would have been a severe emotional trigger for an already mentally unstable man. They called it a tragic reaction to unbearable betrayal. But the prosecution fired back. You don't shoot someone 3 times out of heartbreak. You do that out of hate. They reminded the court that Jerome had bought the gun weeks before the murder, that he'd been spiraling for months, that LaToya had begged him to get help. Still, the letter cast a long, dark shadow over the case. And then, another twist, LaToya's personal journal surfaced. It was found tucked in a box of old college textbooks in the closet. A brown leather-bound notebook with gold-trimmed pages. Inside were entries going back over a year. Some were joyful, her hopes about a new life, her dreams of motherhood. Others were heartbreaking, stories of isolation, feeling trapped, and how she believed Jerome might be capable of something dangerous. But one entry stood out. Dated 2 weeks before her death, she wrote, "Brandon says we can move to Atlanta and start over. He says he'll raise the baby no matter what. I believe him. But Jerome, he's not just broken. He's angry. And when he's angry, he becomes someone I don't recognize. I have to be careful. If I leave too fast, he'll snap. I've seen it in his eyes." That journal entry became the centerpiece of the prosecution's closing argument. It proved premeditation. It proved fear. And worst of all, it proved LaToya knew she was in danger. But like so many victims of domestic violence, she believed she could outpace it, escape it, outsmart it. But she couldn't. Her story, like too many others, ended in blood before it ever had a chance to begin again. Still, one question refused to die. Was LaToya actually pregnant? With no autopsy test results confirming it, only a letter, a journal, and a sealed test, there was no way to say for sure. But for Brandon, that uncertainty was torture. He told a local news station, "Every night I wonder, was she carrying my child? Was that little life taken too? I'll never forgive myself if she was." The community was torn in half. Church members argued LaToya sinned by stepping out of her marriage. Others said she was a victim, emotionally neglected, psychologically abused, and lured into a moment of weakness by someone who made her feel alive again. One neighbor, an older black woman who'd known LaToya since she was a teen, told reporters, "Sometimes folks don't leave until it's too late. Because love turns into guilt. Guilt turns into fear. And fear keeps you stuck." By now, the entire state of North Carolina was following the case. Social media was on fire. Everyone had an opinion. But behind all the noise was a family, two families, ripped apart. Jerome sat in his prison cell, refusing visitors. Not even his mother could reach him. He wrote one letter from jail, addressed to no one in particular. "I didn't plan to kill her. I swear. I just wanted her to hear me. To feel what I'd been feeling for years. But when she looked at me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter, I lost everything. I lost my mind." And Brandon? He left Charlotte. Quietly. No press conference. No goodbye. Just gone. Some say he moved to Atlanta after all. Others say he disappeared completely, trying to outrun the guilt. But LaToya's name remained. On t-shirts at a domestic violence rally. On a mural painted downtown by local artists. On the lips of every woman who's ever asked herself the hardest question. How do I leave without dying first? And then, just when the city started to heal, Kendra, the younger sister who had been living with them, came forward with something that turned the story on its head again. She had a recording. One she'd made just 5 days before the murder. And in it, LaToya admitted something no one was prepared for. Something that could change the narrative completely. The audio file was 2 minutes and 47 seconds long. Crackly, but clear enough to hear two voices, LaToya and Kendra, talking in hushed tones. The kind of late-night bedroom conversation sisters have when the rest of the house is asleep and the truth feels safer in whispers. But what LaToya said on that recording would send shockwaves not just through her family, but through the entire investigation. "I lied to him," she said. Kendra replied, "Lied to who?" LaToya took a breath. "Brandon. I told him I might be pregnant, but I'm not. I wanted him to stay." The story had leaned on the possibility that LaToya was carrying another man's child. It shaped motives. It twisted the courtroom. It gave Jerome's defense something to hold on to. But now, this recording blew all that apart. There was no baby. There never had been. And the truth? LaToya had fabricated the pregnancy to keep Brandon close. To keep him invested. To make the fairy tale feel real. After 13 years of heartbreak with Jerome, she wanted something, anything, to feel like it had a future. Even if that future was built on a lie. The revelation left Kendra shaken. She turned the recording over to detectives after weeks of holding on to it, unsure if it would help or only hurt. But in the end, she said, the truth matters. Even now. Maybe especially now. When prosecutors reviewed the tape, they were stunned. It didn't change the fact that Jerome killed LaToya. But it did change the why. Because if LaToya wasn't pregnant, then Jerome's motive couldn't be pinned on a paternal betrayal. It meant he wasn't reacting to the loss of a family, he was reacting to the loss of control. He didn't kill her because she was carrying another man's child. He killed her because she was leaving, because she no longer feared him. And that, in his mind, was worse. The DA released a public statement after the recording surfaced. This tape confirms that LaToya Bryant was not pregnant at the time of her murder. We now have to look at this case not as a crime of passion, but as a calculated act of domestic violence rooted in possessiveness and obsession. The news reopened fresh wounds for LaToya's family. For weeks, they'd been grieving not just her, but the unborn child they believed was lost. To learn that it was a lie made some feel betrayed all over again. Marcus, her brother, posted another viral message. I don't care if she lied. She still deserved to live. She was trying to get out. That man still murdered her. Period. But Brandon? He was devastated. He gave a teary interview from an undisclosed location. She lied to me, but I get it. She was scared. She wanted something real, and I made her feel like she could have it. I don't hate her for it. I just wish I could have saved her before it was too late. Social media split into two camps. Some called LaToya manipulative. Others said she was a victim trying to survive in a toxic world. A therapist who had been following the case offered this insight on a podcast. People think lying about pregnancy is about drama or manipulation, but sometimes it's about desperation. LaToya had lost so much, her babies, her marriage, her peace. So she created hope. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. And still, beneath all the headlines and debates, was Jerome. Sitting in prison, now faced with a chilling truth. He didn't just take the life of a woman who betrayed him. He took the life of a woman who wasn't even carrying the betrayal he thought. And that realization began to unravel him. Prison guards noted his behavior changed dramatically after the recording was played during a follow-up legal hearing. He stopped eating, refused his daily yard time, sat in his bunk, mumbling to himself. One night, he screamed so loudly, the entire block was placed on lockdown. The nurse's report simply read, "Inmate experiencing signs of emotional collapse." Mentioned the phrase, "She wasn't even pregnant," 17 times in 1 hour. But then came another revelation, one that nobody saw coming. During a private review of LaToya's journal, Kendra found something she'd overlooked before. A half-ripped page, tucked behind the back cover, written in faint pencil. It wasn't dated, but it was signed with a heart. The note read, "If anything happens to me, check the envelope taped under the dresser drawer. Tell my sister I'm sorry I didn't leave sooner." Investigators rushed to the house, now empty, sealed off since the crime scene. And there, underneath the bottom drawer of LaToya's makeup dresser, was a yellow envelope. Inside it, a black and white photograph, a printed receipt, and a second letter. The photo was old, LaToya and Brandon, cheek to cheek, arms around each other at a bar. Smiling. Together. But what stood out was the date stamp in the bottom corner. 2014. That was nearly 8 years before the murder. And the receipt? It was from a hotel just outside Greensboro, dated that same weekend. Meaning LaToya and Brandon's affair hadn't started a few months before her death. It had started years ago. Long before the miscarriages. Long before Jerome lost his job. Possibly, even before their marriage began to crack. And the letter? It was addressed to Brandon. In it, LaToya confessed, "I can't keep living in two worlds. You were my first love, even when I chose Jerome. I know I hurt you when I married him, but I never stopped loving you. Maybe I married the wrong man. Maybe I was just scared. But what we have now feels like coming home." The affair had not just destroyed the marriage. It had preceded it. And the betrayal Jerome felt may not have been paranoia, but prophecy. All along, the person he welcomed into his home, his cousin, had been the shadow behind his wife's smile. Now, the tragedy wasn't just about one broken marriage. It was about a love triangle that had been tangled for over a decade. A secret that started long before the first "I do." And a murder that may have been brewing since the very beginning. The moment investigators revealed the 2014 hotel receipt and photo, the case detonated all over again. Jerome hadn't just lost his wife. He'd lost her twice, first to betrayal he never saw coming, and then to a truth he could no longer deny. Back in 2014, Jerome and LaToya were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. He had posted pictures online of the dinner he arranged. Candles, flowers, her favorite red velvet cake. To him, they were solid. They were finally bouncing back from their second miscarriage. He was making plans to buy a home. They had even started talking about adopting. But while Jerome was posting anniversary photos, LaToya was in a hotel room with Brandon. That receipt, dated 2 days before their anniversary, placed her nearly 90 miles from home. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The room was booked under Brandon's name, paid in cash. And the image? LaToya, snuggled under his arm, eyes sleepy, wearing the same necklace Jerome had given her for their second Christmas together. The photo had never seen the light of day, until now. And with that revelation, everything changed. Brandon's narrative of being a shoulder to cry on during LaToya's final months? Gone. This wasn't a new flame sparked by a failing marriage. This was a fire that had been burning for years, hidden under layers of guilt, secrets, and carefully crafted lies. The DA's office reviewed the new evidence and held an emergency press conference. This new timeline reveals that Jerome Bryant was likely living in a marriage built on deception from very early on. While it does not justify his actions, it forces us to reconsider the depth of emotional manipulation involved. And the public? They exploded. Comment sections, Twitter threads, podcasts, everyone had an opinion. Some said Jerome had been gaslit into madness, that his murder was the inevitable result of years of being emotionally tormented. Others argued that no amount of betrayal gives a man the right to kill, that LaToya may have made mistakes, but she didn't deserve to die for them. But what no one was talking about was how LaToya and Brandon's secret affair began in the first place. The answer lay in an old friend, Tasha Miles, a college roommate of LaToya's. She reached out after seeing news coverage and dropped a bombshell. She told investigators LaToya and Brandon were together before Jerome ever entered the picture. She loved him, but her parents didn't approve, said Brandon was too wild, too unstable. So she broke it off. Then she met Jerome. According to Tasha, LaToya didn't stop loving Brandon. She just replaced him. Jerome was safe, reliable, church-going. He had a plan, a steady job, and he looked good on paper. Brandon? He was passion, unpredictability, fire. So LaToya buried the feelings for a while. But Brandon never disappeared. He was at family events, birthdays, cookouts, and every time she saw him, it stirred something inside her. The affair didn't start out physical. It started with long glances, late-night text messages that said, "Just thinking about you." Secret jokes at dinner tables, exchanged smiles when no one else was looking. But by 2014, it had gone full-blown. LaToya was living a double life. And Jerome? He never had a clue. Until one night in 2018, 4 years before the murder, when he found a text on LaToya's old phone. "I miss the way you look at me when no one else is around." B. He confronted her. She told him it was just flirting, that she didn't mean anything by it. He chose to believe her. He wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that his cousin and his wife were in love behind his back, was too much to bear. But from that point on, the seed was planted. Jerome started watching her more closely, counting her hours, checking her location, asking questions he never used to ask. And slowly, his trust turned into obsession. That obsession came to a head in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Jerome lost his father to COVID-19. His HVAC company cut his hours. And LaToya? She started working longer nights. Only now we know, those late shifts were sometimes spent in Brandon's apartment. She was slipping further and further away. And Jerome? He was unraveling. One night, he stood outside their bedroom, watching LaToya sleep, and whispered, "You don't see me anymore. But I see everything." Kendra, sleeping in the guest room that night, heard it. She wrote it down. And now, looking back, she told reporters, "That was the moment I realized he wasn't just sad anymore. He was dangerous." Despite all of this, despite every warning sign, LaToya stayed. But maybe she hoped he'd change. Maybe she felt guilty. Or maybe, like so many women caught between survival and shame, she just didn't know how to leave. But the final straw came in early June, just weeks before the murder. Jerome found a printed copy of divorce documents in the home office drawer. Not filed. He confronted her again. She didn't deny it this time. She said she was leaving, for real. Not just for herself, but to finally start a life that felt like hers. And in the weeks that followed, she began slowly packing small things. Quietly calling apartments. Whispering to Brandon late at night about starting fresh. She had no idea Jerome had already bought the gun. And every night she slept beside him, she didn't know she was one day closer to dying. Until that final night, July 2nd, when she walked into that bedroom with her scarf tied, her lavender nightgown on, and her heart set on tomorrow. Jerome had no intention of letting her see it. He ended everything. But now, with the truth of her years-long affair exposed, the public's empathy began to splinter. Some called her a cheater. Others called her a woman caught in an emotional chokehold. But one voice stood out the most, the pastor who married them. At a small vigil outside the church where Jerome and LaToya exchanged vows, he stood up and said, "We are not here to decide who sinned more. We are here because love, when twisted, can turn into violence. And when secrets grow too long in the dark, they destroy everyone." But the saga wasn't over yet. Because just when the family thought every secret had been unearthed, a private investigator, hired by Jerome's cousin's family, found one final clue. An old, locked phone, hidden in Brandon's garage. And on that phone, a video that had been deleted, recovered, and restored. A video that could flip the story one more time. The phone was old, an iPhone 6 with a cracked screen and water damage at the bottom. Brandon had tossed it in a box labeled junk in his garage in Atlanta. He thought it was dead, unusable. But the private investigator hired by his own uncle, Jerome's father's brother, wasn't convinced. He knew that when people run from secrets, they don't delete them. They just bury them. After hours of digital forensics, the PI recovered a single video from the phone's internal memory. The file was shaky, blurry at first, but what it captured was enough to change everything we thought we knew. The timestamp? October 15, 2017. LaToya and Brandon. In bed. Talking. Laughing. And most importantly, recording themselves. Brandon was the one holding the camera, and his voice was playful. "Say it again, Toya. Just one more time for the people in the back." Vita smiled. Tired, but alive. She leaned into the camera and said, "I'm never going back to him. Ever. Jerome can have the house. He can have the church. He can have his fake image. But he'll never have me again. Not like before." Then, Brandon said something no one expected. "You think he'll hurt you if you leave?" LaToya hesitated, then whispered, "He won't get the chance." The screen went black. The silence that followed in that investigator's office was heavy. Because what LaToya said didn't just imply a plan, it implied confidence. As if she believed that, somehow, she'd always stay 2 steps ahead of Jerome. She didn't. Investigators reviewed the video, cross-checked the date, and realized that this wasn't just proof of a long-term affair. It was evidence of premeditation. LaToya had been planning to leave as early as 2017, 5 years before her death. But she never followed through. Because something, or someone, kept pulling her back. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered a string of threatening emails sent anonymously to LaToya's work account during that time. The sender used a fake address. No name. Just 1 sentence per message. "Leave him and you'll regret it." The emails stopped for a year, then started again in 2020. Same tone, same threat. Investigators originally assumed the emails came from Jerome, but his digital footprint showed no connection. No IP matches. No typing patterns. Nothing linking him directly. That left one terrifying possibility. What if it wasn't Jerome? What if someone else had a reason to keep LaToya and Jerome together? Someone who didn't want the truth to come out. Someone who had their own secrets to protect. At this point, the case was beginning to feel more like a psychological thriller than a domestic dispute. And the next person to speak up would push it into full-blown chaos. Her name was Amber Daniels. She used to work with Brandon at the car dealership in Charlotte, and she came forward with a jaw-dropping claim. "I was in a relationship with Brandon in 2017, she said. "He told me he was in love with someone else, but he wouldn't tell me who. Said it was complicated. Said if it ever came out, it would blow up everything." Amber didn't think much of it at the time, until she saw LaToya's face on the news. Until she recognized that face as the one Brandon had on his lock screen back then. That's when she knew. And then Amber said something that stunned detectives. Brandon wasn't just obsessed with LaToya. He said he didn't want her to leave Jerome yet. He said if she left too soon, it would ruin everything. What did he mean by that? What was Brandon trying to protect? Theories exploded online. Some believed Brandon had been manipulating LaToya for years, feeding her hope but keeping her trapped between 2 lives so he could control the narrative. Others believed he was protecting himself. And one theory stood out. What if Brandon wanted Jerome to snap? What if Brandon had planted the idea of leaving, the pregnancy lie, the whispers of betrayal, knowing it would push Jerome over the edge? Because if Jerome ended things violently, Brandon wouldn't be the bad guy. He'd be the survivor, the heartbroken lover, the grieving partner, the one who almost got his happy ending, but never quite did. Suddenly, Brandon wasn't just the other man. He was possibly the puppet master. The district attorney reopened the investigation, this time not to charge Brandon with murder, but to explore criminal negligence, emotional coercion, and obstruction. Could he have knowingly contributed to LaToya's death? And if so, could he face time? They subpoenaed Brandon's financial records, his emails, his text logs. And that's when they found it. A $4,000 cash withdrawal from Brandon's account, made 2 weeks before LaToya's murder. The withdrawal was flagged because it matched the exact amount used to book the hotel suite in Atlanta. But the booking wasn't made by Brandon. It was made by Brandon's best friend, meaning Brandon may have intentionally kept his name off the reservation, just in case. Just in case what? Just in case something went wrong? Just in case LaToya never showed up? Or worse, just in case she never made it out of that house? This theory, that Brandon had carefully orchestrated every move from behind the scenes, was growing stronger. And Kendra? She'd had enough. She stood in front of the media and said, "My sister was no saint. She lied. She cheated. But she didn't deserve to be played like a pawn in someone else's game. If Brandon knew she was in danger, and he did nothing, that's blood on his hands too." Public opinion turned fast. Brandon, once the broken-hearted side piece, was now a suspect of manipulation. He lawyered up, refused all interviews, and vanished from the public eye again. But LaToya's story didn't vanish. It kept digging into people's minds. Because now they weren't just asking, why did Jerome kill her? They were asking, who really killed LaToya Bryant? Was it the man who pulled the trigger? Or the man who gave her the script? And just when investigators thought they had exhausted every last secret, Brandon's ex-girlfriend, Amber, came forward with a voicemail he accidentally left on her phone. A voicemail recorded the night before LaToya's death. In it, Brandon is heard saying just one thing. If she actually leaves him tomorrow, this whole thing changes. I gotta be ready. What thing was he talking about? And what, exactly, was he getting ready for? The voicemail was chilling. Brandon's voice was calm, too calm. No panic, no fear. Just a low, steady whisper recorded by mistake when he forgot to hang up after a brief call to his ex, Amber. If she actually leaves him tomorrow, this whole thing changes. I gotta be ready. The message lasted only 6 seconds. But in those 6 seconds, he gave away more than he'd ever meant to. Investigators combed through his previous calls, trying to figure out who else he might have spoken to that day. They uncovered 2 calls made from his phone just minutes after that voicemail, one to a local storage unit, and another to a contact saved as G. No last name, no details, just G. When they pulled the records, G was traced to a burner phone. Untraceable, unregistered, but located in the same cell tower radius as Jerome and LaToya's house on the night of the murder. Which meant someone else, someone close to Brandon, was in the area when LaToya died. The police never found another suspect at the scene. But now it looked like Brandon hadn't been alone in planning something. And maybe Jerome wasn't either. At this point, detectives were forced to revisit an uncomfortable theory. What if Jerome didn't act alone that night? It was a theory that seemed ridiculous at first. The 911 call was clear. The gun was in his hand. LaToya was found inside their bedroom, with no evidence of forced entry or a second person in the house. But when forensics re-examined the scene, something peculiar stood out: a muddy boot print found just inside the back door. It didn't match Jerome's shoes. And Kendra had been out of town. So who did it belong to? They ran the print through the database. No match. But there was one person who had a pair of size 11 Timberlands sitting in the garage of his Atlanta home. Brandon. When they asked him about the print, he claimed, "I hadn't been near that house in weeks." But text messages told a different story. 2 days before the murder, Brandon texted LaToya, "You sure you can't slip out early? You know I'm down to help you pack." Meaning he planned to be in the house. Maybe not that night, but close enough to leave a footprint. And here's where things spiraled into the realm of dark possibility. What if Brandon was at the house that night? What if he showed up, waited outside, and heard the argument? What if he saw what happened, and left without saying a word? But worse, what if he was part of the plan all along? Some believe Jerome acted alone, fueled by rage, jealousy, and betrayal. But now others were saying, what if Jerome and Brandon struck a deal? Sounds insane, right? But look at the timeline. LaToya wanted to leave. Brandon was ready to start over. But divorce? That's messy. Division of property. Public shame. Reputation ruined. But a tragic murder? That resets the board. Brandon gets sympathy. Jerome avoids public humiliation. And LaToya? She's silenced forever. Too dark? Maybe. But Brandon's deleted voicemail, the secret video, the burner phone, and that muddy boot print all pointed to one thing. He knew more than he claimed. Even Kendra, who once trusted Brandon like a brother, started to believe he wasn't just complicit. He was dangerous. He got in her head, she told reporters. He was always charming. But under that charm was control. He fed her fantasies, pulled her strings. And when things started to unravel, he let her take the fall. And then came the bombshell. A letter, written by Jerome. From prison. It was addressed to Brandon. It arrived at Brandon's apartment and was intercepted by authorities thanks to the ongoing investigation. You said she'd walk out and I'd keep the house. That we'd both win. You said she'd leave quietly. But that's not what happened. You left me with the mess. You left me alone in the blood. But everything changed. That one paragraph confirmed what investigators feared. There had been a conversation. Maybe even a plan. Brandon had promised something. Jerome had expected something. But it didn't go the way either of them thought. And now, one was locked up. The other was free. But neither one would be for long. A grand jury was called. Brandon was subpoenaed. And just days before he was set to testify, he disappeared. No call. No text. Vanished. His car was found in a Kroger parking lot outside Atlanta. Empty. Keys in the ignition. Wallet still in the seat. No signs of foul play. No surveillance footage. Just gone. Some say he ran. Others think he didn't make it out of the city. But that silence, that sudden disappearance, only deepens suspicions. Because people who are innocent, they don't run. Not like that. Kendra broke down during a televised interview. I don't know what's real anymore, she said, her voice cracking. I thought I buried my sister. But I'm starting to realize, I don't even know the story I'm grieving. And then the final twist. 2 weeks after Brandon vanished, police found a safe deposit box under his name in Charlotte. Inside were 3 things. 1. A burner phone. 2. A flash drive. 3. A typed letter, sealed in an envelope marked, "Only if I disappear." That flash drive contained video surveillance. Security footage from the night of July 2nd. Not from Jerome and LaToya's home, but from across the street. A neighbor's motion-activated driveway camera. On the footage, a man walking around the back of the house at 11:42 p.m., 6 minutes before LaToya was shot. He was wearing a hoodie and Timberland boots. The footage was grainy, but undeniable. A tall figure in a dark hoodie, Timberland boots, walking calmly, not running, around the back of Jerome and LaToya's home at exactly 11:42 p.m. That was 6 minutes before the first shot was fired. Investigators enhanced the footage frame by frame. You couldn't see a face, but you could see the posture, the slow, calculated walk, the turn of the head toward the house, as if the man knew exactly which window to watch. It wasn't Jerome. He was confirmed to be inside at that time. So who was it? All signs pointed to Brandon. The boots, the hoodie, matching the one seen in a social media photo posted by Brandon just a week prior. And most damning of all, the man on camera pulled out a phone. And the glow of the screen revealed one quick flash of a background image, just enough for tech experts to identify the lock screen. It was the same image found on Brandon's old iPhone 6. LaToya, smiling, wearing red lipstick, leaning against his shoulder. It was him. He had been there, right outside, moments before she died. He didn't call 911. He didn't knock. He watched. And then he vanished. The letter found in the safe deposit box only made things worse. It was typed, cold, direct. If you're reading this, then something's gone wrong. I never wanted her to die. I wanted her free. But I knew Jerome would break. I knew he wouldn't survive the truth. Maybe I pushed too far. Maybe I should have walked away. But I couldn't. Not after everything we'd been through. I loved her. Maybe I destroyed her. Brandon never confessed to being part of the murder. But in just a few words, he admitted to the manipulation, to the pressure, to the mental chess game that pushed two people to the edge. One over it, and one into hiding. The district attorney made a bold move. They charged Brandon, in absentia, with conspiracy to commit murder and accessory before the fact. Warrants were issued nationwide. His face, once the quiet cousin, was now plastered across news outlets from Georgia to California. And yet, no one could find him. Not his family. Not his friends. Not even the PI who had once dug up every secret he left behind. Gone. Until 1 week later, a trucker pulled off Interstate 20 outside of Augusta, Georgia. He needed to stretch his legs, grab a coffee. As he passed a small wooded area just off the ramp, he saw something that made him stop. A shoe. Half buried in the mud. Timberland. Nearby, under the brush, a body. Decomposed. Face unrecognizable. But the wallet in the jeans? Held Brandon Bryant's ID. The coroner would later confirm through dental records. It was him. No bullet wound. No stab marks. No sign of physical trauma. Toxicology showed a mixture of alcohol and high levels of prescription sleeping pills. No suicide note. Just a man who ran out of moves. LaToya was gone. Jerome was locked away. And Brandon? He had finally met the one fate he couldn't manipulate. The headlines hit fast and hard. Key figure in Bryant murder mystery found dead in Georgia. Brandon Bryant's death marks final chapter in tragic love triangle. But was it really the final chapter? Because even in death, Brandon left behind one more piece of the puzzle. That flash drive contained not just the surveillance video, but audio files. Secretly recorded conversations between him and LaToya, spanning 4 years. In one of them, dated just weeks before her murder, she can be heard saying, "Sometimes I wonder if you ever loved me, or if I was just your way of getting back at Jerome." There was silence. Then Brandon said, "Maybe it was both." That recording confirmed it all. The affair, the game, the emotional warfare. Brandon didn't just want LaToya. He wanted revenge. Revenge on a cousin who always had the better job, the better house, the praise from the family. And LaToya? She was caught in the middle. She thought she was escaping one prison, but she was just walking into another. And when she finally decided to choose herself, both men turned on her. One ended her life. The other disappeared, haunted by the truth. Jerome, now in year 2 of his life sentence, was asked in a rare prison interview if he ever thought Brandon wanted LaToya dead. He looked straight into the camera and said, "Brandon never wanted her dead. He just wanted her miserable. I did the rest." And with that sentence, the tragedy closed. No one was innocent. Not really. Not in the way people want to believe. Because this wasn't just a story about a man killing his wife. It was about secrets left to rot. Love turned into poison. And a chain of betrayal so thick, no one made it out alive. Not even the one who thought he was in control all along. The funeral was quiet. Not the first one, LaToya's. Not the second, Brandon's. But the third, Jerome's mother. She died of a stroke less than 3 months after Brandon's body was found. Some say it was the stress. Others said it was the shame. But at that funeral, something unexpected happened. Kendra showed up. Black dress. No makeup. No anger in her eyes. Just exhaustion. She stood in the back, barely noticed by the family that once loved her as a niece. But Jerome saw her. In shackles, escorted by 2 guards, he looked at Kendra as he was ushered to the front row, and nodded. A small gesture. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Just acknowledgement. Like he was saying, "We both know how deep this went." Because by now, the public had moved on. The headlines faded. The podcasts wrapped up. The YouTube series got its final views. But for the people who lived it, this tragedy never ended. Jerome remained in prison, refusing all appeals. He wrote only one more letter, addressed to no one. People keep asking me if I regret it. What I regret is staying. I should have left her the first time I felt small in her presence. Instead, I let love turn me into something I don't recognize. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect understanding. I just want the world to stop pretending that pain makes you a monster. Sometimes it just makes you lost. The letter never left the prison. It was found torn into pieces in his cell one morning. But a guard, curious, taped it back together and turned it in. And that's how it ended up in evidence. Filed. Forgotten. Until a journalism student at UNC stumbled on the case for her senior project. She reopened everything. Interviews, recordings, photos, letters, and in the process, uncovered one last secret. Buried in a folder labeled Miscellaneous, Bryant Case. A birth certificate, issued 4 months before LaToya's murder. The mother's name, LaToya Simone Bryant. The child? Baby girl. Father's name? Left blank. No one, not Jerome, not Brandon, was listed. No one even knew she'd had a baby. Not her coworkers. Not Kendra. Not her church family. But the hospital confirmed it. LaToya had given birth in secret at a private birthing center 2 towns away. And put the child up for adoption immediately. No trace. No follow-up. Just gone. Vanished into the system. And the most shocking part? The birth date matched perfectly with what would have been her 3rd miscarriage. She told everyone she'd lost that pregnancy. But she didn't. She just gave the baby away. Which begged one final, heart-shattering question. Who was the father? DNA testing was impossible now. Brandon was gone. Jerome was locked up. And the child's identity was protected by the adoption agency. But the student journalist, who had spent months on the case, ended her project with one final theory. Maybe LaToya lied to protect the baby from both men. Maybe she realized that love from either of them would always come with control, punishment, or obsession. So she chose something else: silence, secrecy, safety. Maybe that baby was her last shot at breaking the cycle. The paper won an award. The story was published nationwide. And soon, people weren't just mourning LaToya. They were searching, looking for the child she left behind. The child that could still be out there, living, breathing, wondering where she came from. The internet exploded. Reddit threads, TikTok theories. One user even claimed to be the child, saying her adoptive parents had told her she came from a complicated family history in North Carolina. There was no proof, just speculation, but it was enough to keep the story alive, and enough to keep the public hooked, because this wasn't just about a murder anymore. It was about legacy, what we leave behind, what we try to protect, and what we'll never outrun, no matter how deep we bury it. In the end, LaToya's story wasn't just about infidelity, or revenge, or domestic violence. It was about survival, and sacrifice, and a woman trying to free herself from 2 men who loved her so much. They destroyed her. But before she died, she left behind one pure thing. One secret the world couldn't take. A life. Untouched. Unclaimed. And maybe, just maybe, unbroken. 3 years after LaToya's murder, a small DNA testing company in Atlanta released a press statement. They'd recently expanded a partnership with a national genealogy platform to help adopted children connect with biological relatives, with consent on both sides. No names were mentioned, no cases highlighted, but tucked deep in the press release was a single line. In one rare case, a North Carolina-based adoptee was connected to previously untraceable maternal DNA. Kendra saw it by chance, scrolling late at night, insomnia tearing through her chest like it had every night since her sister's death. She stared at that sentence, heart pounding, and something inside her said, "This is it." She emailed the company, attached her legal ID and family records, and asked if they had any matches linked to her late sister, LaToya Bryant. 3 days later, they responded. One sentence. "Please call us directly." Kendra's hands trembled as she dialed. And when they picked up, everything around her went still. "There's a match," the woman on the phone said. She's 3 years old. Her name is Ava, and you're listed as a 99.98% probable biological aunt. Kendra didn't speak for almost a minute. Then she whispered, "She's real. Ava, the child no one knew existed. The child born in secret, placed in private adoption, and hidden away from the bloodbath her biological family had become. And now, she was back on the radar." Kendra was given no adoptive parent details, just the assurance that the child was happy, safe, and healthy. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Kendra needed to know more. So she did something she once promised herself she wouldn't. She hired a private investigator. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of dead ends, confidential records, roadblocks. Until finally, a photo was sent to Kendra's inbox. A little girl. Chubby cheeks. Deep brown eyes. A tiny gold bracelet with the letter T. Sitting on the lap of a woman, a white woman. The adoptive mother. A schoolteacher from Savannah, Georgia. Married. 2 children of her own. And Ava. Kendra wept for hours after seeing the photo. Not out of sadness, but relief. LaToya's legacy hadn't ended in a pool of blood. It had survived. It had grown. And now it was smiling, barefoot, wearing pink pajamas and holding a stuffed turtle. But what Kendra didn't expect, what no one expected, was the letter the adoptive mother sent 1 month later. She'd heard about LaToya's case. She'd seen it in the headlines. And when she learned Ava's full birth history, she said her entire view of motherhood changed. "If you ever want to meet her," she wrote, "when she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her everything. She deserves to know where she came from. And she deserves to know you." Kendra flew to Savannah the next spring. No cameras. No press. Just her, standing outside a modest home, holding a teddy bear and a heart full of memories. Ava didn't know who she was. She just ran to the door, giggling, calling out to her adoptive mom. But when Kendra saw her, she saw LaToya. The eyes. The dimple. The fire. And in that moment, for the first time since her sister's murder, she breathed. Years passed. Jerome died behind bars. Heart failure. No one claimed the body. Brandon's death remained labeled accidental overdose, though conspiracy theories still swirl about whether it was suicide or silence enforced by someone who knew too much. The neighborhood in Charlotte where it all happened? Quite now. The house was torn down, replaced by a playground. Irony or poetry? You decide. But Ava? She's thriving. Kendra sees her once a year, at her birthday party. The adoptive parents made her a photo album titled, "The Woman Who Loved You First." It has pictures of LaToya, letters she wrote, journal entries. The truth, age-appropriate, but honest. And when Ava asked at 5 years old, "Is my real mommy in heaven?" Kendra knelt down and said, "Yes, baby. But she left a piece of herself here, and that piece is you." And so, the story that started with betrayal, that exploded with murder, that twisted through jealousy, secrets, and broken promises, ended with peace. Not for everyone, but for one. For Ava, who will grow up knowing the truth not as a weight, but as armor. Who will know that she was not the result of shame, but the reason one woman risked everything to break the cycle. And dear viewer, if there's one lesson this entire story leaves behind, it's this. Secrets don't stay buried. Love can turn toxic when it's built on lies. And sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do is walk away before the story writes her ending for her. So tell us, what would you have done, dear viewer? Would you have left? Would you have stayed? Do you believe LaToya was right to hide her baby? And do you think Brandon really planned it all, or just lost control? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe every truth deserves a voice. And remember, some love stories don't end with happily ever after. Some end with a headline, but the truth? That lives on forever.